Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining today's conversation with Dan and Caitlin from Solihten. Very excited for the conversation. And before we jump into the topic in the conversation, Dan and Caitlin would love if you could just introduce yourself and the organization for our listeners.
Sure, I'll jump in. So I'm Dan Stevens. I'm the president and CEO at the Solihten Institute, and we're a national network of nonprofit counseling centers. We're based in Denver, but we have centers in 23 states and staff that are spread out around the country. Our centers are different in size and complexity, but all of them see clients for psychotherapy, regardless of their ability to pay. And all of our centers are particularly well equipped to integrate people's spiritual identities and their beliefs into the process of therapy following their lead. And so at the national office, what we do is accredit these nonprofit centers around the country. We support them and equip them in their work, and we connect and inspire them to always get better and serve more people.
All right, I'm Caitlin Donley. I am the Director of Development for Solihten Institute. So I primarily work in the fundraising for the national level, but then I support all of our nonprofit centers across the country in their fundraising efforts as we're trying to move the needle forward. I am a lifelong nonprofit and have been in fundraising for almost 20 years now.
Great. Well, it's great to have both of you here. One other sort of like introductory question, if I can, and I love to ask is, prior to starting and running Funraise, I spent 13 years building two nonprofit organizations that were, very narrow focused in mission. And it was, I got involved in starting both these organizations because they're like very personal reasons that were like close to me and wanting to make the world better in these like specific areas that I was working in. And so I always like to ask leaders working in a nonprofit is like, what's your why? Why Solihten and in the role that you have? And so Dan and Caitlin, if you wouldn't mind sort of sharing with our listeners sort of what inspires you within the work that you're doing, would love to get started there.
I'm happy to jump in. I've been working the last 10 years of my career with victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and youth in crisis. And what I've seen time and time again is trauma and the impacts of unhealed trauma. And if we can work with individuals to work upstream to help heal themselves, we can stop cycles of violence that are persistent across our communities in our country. And really what drove me to Solihten and what I love the most about it is how we support our nonprofits. Running a nonprofit is tough work, and we are kind of those, extra hands to make the work a little bit easier. And I love how we created a network and a support system for peer sharing and foster a great deal of respect and able to share information and best practices.
Wow, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Caitlin. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, so for the past 20 plus years, my career has really been focused in the nonprofit sector, and particularly around helping, I would say, individuals and communities make their lives better together. That is really what has always inspired me, and that's come out in different forms across my career. At Solihten, I've really excited about the chance to help all of these centers help people through their own individual journeys of transformation. And that's really what the process of therapy is about. And so to be able to do that in a context that respects people's spiritual identities, that does it in so many places around the country, and has this incredible community of professionals, like the people who run the centers and the clinicians behind it, all of whom share that same passion about helping individuals and communities make their lives better, and the particular ways that we do that. So I'm incredibly inspired to be part of Solihten, and that's really where it comes from for me.
Sounds like very rewarding work, which I think so many people don't get that opportunity to the work that they do 9 to 5, and often more have that sort of rewarding aspect of working on such an important issue. And so it's really great to kind of hear just the breadth of your guys' reach in terms of the impact that you're making. One thing that stood out for me in sort of just learning more about the organization is you have this like network effect across the country. You're working with many different leaders, executive directors, fundraisers in different markets. And I'm wondering how that has sort of just influenced your approach and even how that has helped enable these executive directors and fundraisers as a result of just this network effect.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. It's one of the most special things about what we do is to have this network of professionals who are all learning from each other. I think how it's affected our work in particular is understanding that every local context for this work is different. So if you're providing mental health care, we're in a highly regulated industry, but we're also mostly smaller nonprofit centers that are doing this work. So that's a really big challenge. And the state regulations and laws around how you provide therapy and deal with insurance, all of those things, they can be quite different just across state lines. And so it's become very important for us to respect the local character of each center and what the challenges they face and the opportunities they have, but at the same time to hold those common threads that all the directors of those centers can learn from each other, because of course there are some, and to hold that missional identity that we have behind it. And so to always have that has been really important. Maybe the most important thing to me, or one of the most important things that we hear time and again from the people who are part of our network, is that it's these smaller groups we create, like for executive directors who actually get together, some online, some in person, and they share case studies with each other of leadership challenges, pieces like that. And so even though their context can be quite different, they have personal relationships with one another where they trust one another enough to be vulnerable and really work on these leadership challenges and make their centers better. And so that's one of my favorite things to see and be part of.
That's awesome. That's great. And Caitlin, I imagine, to Dan's point, working with a lot of smaller nonprofit organizations, probably working with a lot of first-time fundraisers or executive directors who are also, in the fundraising function as a result of the size of the organization. What support do you provide at your level, and what sort of advice are you giving to these executive directors who are maybe coming into fundraising for the first time, or just really starting to learn what it takes to be a fundraiser in the nonprofit industry?
I would say universally, what I'm saying is don't be afraid of fundraising. You need to do it and you need to start. So don't just put it off. And I always recommend making sure that you're allocating resources to it. Ideally, you've got some budget capacity and you can do that. But if not, make sure you're allocating time to understand what fundraising is and how to do that. You need a plan in place for how you're going to go about and accomplish your fundraising goals. So what I do in my role is I lead a monthly, you know, virtual group for our development professionals or our executive directors who are doing the work, where we can come in and we learn on some topics. But also, I'm always available for a one-off call or kind of I look at this in a way where, I'm a consultant on call for these centers. If they have a draft of something, I'm happy to look at that and help them navigate the plan forward. Or if they're contemplating taking on a new opportunity with volunteers or event-based fundraising or digital capacity, just providing some best practices and tips along the way, and then fostering those peer relationships where they can share information amongst each other.
Sounds like very valuable, wow, sorry, stumbling over my words here, but sounds like very valuable work and resources provided to these centers. Dan, something you said, reminded me sort of something I wish I had when I was in the nonprofit space as a founder and fundraiser and an executive. And that was like the sense of community. Building a nonprofit organization is challenging. It can be hard. You often, the way I describe building a nonprofit from the ground up is like you have two hands behind your back, because you don't have a lot of resources, and the resources that you do raise, a large amount of them have to go to programs to keep donors coming back and wanting to stay involved and giving. So it's a different dynamic in many different ways. And so, how have you seen the community? How have you seen the community impact of the work that you guys are doing really propel these organizations to be stronger operationally, maybe more even inspired, and to get past challenges that maybe otherwise would take longer to get over as a result of having this community?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that really somebody who's leading in any organization faces, but in the nonprofit sector, there's a particular character to it. And a lot of that are human resources challenges, right? So how do I, right size this organization to be efficient and deliver on our mission, but not overextend ourselves? And then how do we deal with all those relationship issues on a staff? And often, if you're running a counseling center, you're dealing with staff. You're fortunate to have staff who are very empathetic people, who are pretty in touch with their emotions, who really care about their work. And that's wonderful. And it creates a really mission minded place. It also means that there are conflicts and relationship issues all the time, because that's just the nature of the work and the people who are part of it. So those things come together. And so one of the things I've seen personally in these groups of executive directors is that when they have a human resources challenge, they can go off and speak with this other group of directors about it in a way that's completely confidential, that is outside of their own community, with people who have been through the same things before, and they learn how to manage that, and how to keep the character and the spirit of the kind of staff you have to do this work, and also to do it in a way that respects professional boundaries, that helps the center move forward the way that it needs to do and delivers on its mission every day. That's just one example, but
Yeah.
that's one of the ones I've seen that's just the most crystal clear to me.
Got it. I went through this program as a nonprofit executive director, and it was an accelerator program, and it was with like 12 other nonprofits, and all of us were relatively at the sort of same stage in terms of like revenue, length, and in terms of in business. And oftentimes I think we have this sort of like imposter syndrome when you're building something or leading something, and you look out to like other organizations, and you're like, man, they have it like all put together. They must be doing something like right or something different than what we're doing. But then when you actually like connect face to face, you realize you're actually struggling with a lot of the same things, and you have a lot of the same questions, and that just becomes such valuable feedback as a leader. And I found myself just even more inspired after understanding that like what we're building, the challenges we're going through is common for a leader in this space at our stage. And just understanding that and knowing that was very comforting and inspiring, because it allows you to keep on pushing through, the challenges, and to build resilience when times are hard or tough. And so again, just I can't imagine sort of just how important that community is for all these different centers. Caitlin, I'd love to hear from your, as a practitioner on the front lines of fundraising. I love what you said about not being afraid to ask, not being afraid to fundraise. I think at the end of the day, when we think about the impact we make as a nonprofit organization and the services that we're delivering, we can be very proud of that work. And we know that work to accomplish takes resources and dollars. And so could you expand a little bit more on how you coach maybe executive directors or fundraisers through getting past maybe that initial fear of making an ask or jumping into fundraising? Like how do you help them overcome this challenge?
I think that's the hardest thing. And I will say I had a great mentor when I was a year into fundraising. He said, if you can ask for $100, you can ask for $1 million. And that really has stuck with me over the years. And I think it's really coming back to your organization and what's the impact you have and what's the impact you can have with greater resources. And working with someone to help them articulate that in a way that becomes a compelling fundraising case. And once you can get that written out and once you can say it, then you can put it into, an email campaign, or there's a lot of ways you can leverage and take that one statement and use it in all sorts of fundraising places, whether that's social media, through your digital marketing, through your direct mail, or through your face-to-face asks. Just getting comfortable with why do we matter, why are we important, and what needs going to happen if we are not here. And then, as I've always looked at the role of fundraising, our job is to translate the impact our organizations are having in our communities, and hopefully figuring out how that aligns with a donor and how they want to show up in their philanthropy and their legacy. And when you can find those perfect matches, that's when you find a really positive and great experience. So I kind of work with that piece. And then the other piece I always put there is show and systematically report back on the impact of the gift. Connect with your donors and consistently go back and have a mechanism for how you're going to, just share updates and positive things that are coming from your organization.
Very, very good. One of the things you said that really struck a chord with me was the question: if we didn't exist, what would be missing in the community, or the communities that we're working in? I think that's such a really great way to frame why, as an organization, we exist. All right, because if we didn't, this is what would be missing, and that's really inspiring to, I think, both the fundraiser and the donor and supporter who is investing their hard-earned dollars into the programming, into the work. And so I think that framing it in that perspective is really smart, and also really inspiring. It also helps underscore why you as a nonprofit exist, and connecting those dots is really powerful. What are and this is a question for both of you. What are some of the really positive signals you've both have seen in building this community, this network that you're working with across the nation? What are some of the things you're really proud of that you've been able to accomplish as a result of supporting all of these different organizations across the country?
I can tell you one thing that I'm really proud of, and a lot of it happened before my time there, so I'll be clear about that. But something I'm proud of for the organization, there's still an impact of it that continues today, and that's as we approached COVID, therapy practices had to flip to video therapy overnight. And that's a really challenging thing to do and remain HIPAA compliant and all these pieces you have to think about. But the Solihten Institute had been ahead of the curve on that and it already had set up a provider for that before we ever knew a pandemic was coming. And it's slowly been trying to bring on more providers to that and to help them understand this is the wave of the future and this is going to happen at some point. And to be really honest, the uptake wasn't great on it. And then the pandemic hit. But because Solihten was ready for that and had been eyeing those trends and preparing, like in a week's time, hundreds of therapists got onboarded to that platform. Clients got seen because of that. And these are, again, a lot of these are smaller nonprofits that just absolutely wouldn't have had the capability to figure that out in a week. And so we were able to do that in a really cost effective way. And it continues today that, a number of our centers are still using that same platform that we arranged. And that's just one example to me of in a really difficult time for not just the nonprofits, but the communities and the individuals they serve, we were there and they delivered on the mission because of that. And to me, that's just a really powerful example of that I'm really proud of that happened before I got here.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's being able to pivot that quickly. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of work, and it sounds like the organization was able to pull that off in a really powerful way to allow these organizations to keep running and supporting their clients. And so, kudos to the organization for pulling that off. What about you, Caitlin?
I can't beat that example. And I can say at the time when the pandemic hit, I was working for an organization that did not have virtual therapy. And it took us 6 months to get that online. And that is when you look at the impact of having an organization that can see those national trends and say, what can we do at a national level that's going to, get ahead of the curve? That's what's important. And that's part of what I look at as we go forward and what made me really excited to come over and join this team.
Very cool. That actually is a great segue into my next question is, Dan, I was going to ask, as you think about the next couple years leading the organization, what are you excited to accomplish? Any new initiatives that you can talk about that you're excited to extend to the community that you guys support?
Yeah, so right off the bat, we're growing right now. So we're adding centers to our network, which is really exciting for us. We added 6 in the past year, and we intend to continue doing that, adding more centers, reaching more communities, building our presence out across other states. So just that, of course, is really exciting, and we're really on the cusp of moving that forward more quickly. We also have a series of continuing education courses that are live. They're all online, and those have really taken off. So that like doubled year over year. And it's a great opportunity for clinicians serving in local communities to be able to connect with our national network, connect with other providers, and connect with really excellent faculty that we bring in. And there's a particular focus in that on how do you integrate someone's spiritual practices and beliefs into their therapeutic journey in an appropriate and ethical way. And there's so much rich material around how to do that, but very little training for clinicians in their formal training about how to do that. But it comes up in people's sessions all the time. And so we have what we think is a unique and really valuable resource in that. And so if you follow Solihten from this point forward, you'll see we begin to really market that so that more people know about it because it's grown on its own very organically. And now we've got it in a place where we're ready to invite all of the clinicians who might encounter those issues to come join us for that. So I'm really excited about that.
Very cool. And Caitlin, what about you? What are you excited about for over the next couple of years? Whether that's a particular fundraising campaign that you're pulling off or something else?
I am excited about echoing Dan's piece around growth. I am looking at growing our digital presence in our fundraising space. We just doubled our monthly donors in the last month, and really proud of that, and looking at continuing to just engage our donors in a digital capacity.
Nice. Yeah, it's the landscape of fundraising has been changing, and I think that which was the inspiration for starting Funraise for myself as someone that was in the nonprofit sector and just looked at sort of like how behind we were as a sector in the way that we were fundraising and how we were connecting with donors and stewarding donors. And so I think that as nonprofits have arrived in the 21st century, it's becoming so important to really anchor and have a very strong digital strategy. And it's great to hear that is a priority of yours. Doubling your monthly giving program, that's quite impressive. What was what caused that? What was the drive for the growth? Was it a new offering or a new strategy? I would love to hear how that was doubled.
I'm not going to say it's a revolutionary or new strategy, but I had a donor work with me to create a challenge, participation challenge grant or opportunity. And if we met a certain level of monthly donors, they would unlock a very significant gift to the organization. And we promoted that to our existing donor base, as well as encouraged our board and supporters to help us share this information through their social channels. And it really did work, and we're really excited.
That's great. That is great to hear. And, I think I often talk about how we're, and this is like old news now, but we're living in like a subscription economy, right? Everything has like a monthly cost to it, and we all appreciate a monthly cost versus an annual cost. And so being able to translate that into fundraising and building a community of donors who are constantly reminded of their support and the impact they're making is such a powerful way to build a strong base of donors. And so excited to see how that continues to grow as you guys have some big goals ahead of you, and I'm looking forward to that. Well, I don't want to take up too much more time. I feel like we got a lot of really great information here. And so I appreciate both of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join this conversation, and appreciate just the insights and the stories you've shared with the listeners today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan and Caitlin.